Let me tell you how the conversation started. We were sitting at the kitchen table in our house in Fresno, California, on a Sunday afternoon in October. I had my coffee, Maria had her tea. The grandkids, our son Danny's 3 kids, had been over that morning and had gone home an hour earlier. And the house had that specific Sunday afternoon quality that it always had after the grandkids left, which was warm and slightly too quiet, and full of the small evidence of their presence. A crayon on the floor by the couch, a juice cup on the coffee table, the particular smell of children that lingers longer than the children do. I was looking at my phone, Maria was looking at hers, and she said, in the particular tone she uses when she has been thinking about something for a while and has decided to say it, "Michael, I want to talk about where we are going to live." I thought she meant the house. We had been talking about downsizing. The house was 4 bedrooms, more than 2 people needed, and the maintenance had been getting ahead of us. I thought she meant, should we move to a smaller place in Fresno, maybe closer to Danny and the kids? She did not mean that. She meant the Philippines. I want to tell you that I handled this well. I want to tell you that I heard her out and asked thoughtful questions and approached the conversation with the open mind of a man who trusts his wife of 32 years and who understood that her desire to go home was real and valid and deserved. Serious consideration. What actually happened was that I put my phone down and said, "Maria, Fresno is 20 minutes from Danny's house." And she said, "I know." And that was the beginning of the longest, most honest, most important negotiation of our marriage. My name is Michael. I am 68 years old. I am originally from Sacramento, California. I am married to Maria, who is 64 years old, and who grew up in a small city in the Philippines called Iloilo, and who came to the United States in 1993 on a nursing visa, and who has been for the 32 years since. The most important person in my life. This is the story of what happened when the retirement we had planned became the retirement she needed, and what we found when we followed where she led. I need to tell you about Maria before I tell you anything else, because without understanding who she is, the rest of the story doesn't make the sense it deserves to make. Maria is a woman who built herself in America. That is the most accurate way I know to say it. She arrived in 1993 with a nursing credential from the Philippines that she had to re-qualify to use in California, which she did in 18 months while working as a nursing aide at a hospital in Sacramento, where we met and where I was a physical therapist. She spent 28 years as a registered nurse, the last 16 in the cardiac unit at the same hospital. And she was, and I say this not as a husband, but as someone who watched her work for a decade before we both retired, one of the best nurses I have ever seen. The kind of nurse patients ask for by name. The kind of nurse other nurses defer to when something is unclear. She built a career. She built a family in America. Our son Danny, who was born in Sacramento in 1998, who went to school in Sacramento, who met his wife in Sacramento, and who now has 3 children in Fresno, and who is the reason I thought we were staying in California. She built friendships that lasted decades. She became, in every practical sense, an American woman. And she missed the Philippines every day of those 32 years. Not visibly, not loudly, not in a way that required attention. Quietly. In the way that people carry something that has no satisfactory resolution. You do not display it, because displaying it does not help. And because the life you are living is real and good and worth being present in, but it is there. She talked to her sisters in Iloilo every week for 32 years. She sent money home every month for 32 years. To her mother, who is now gone, and to her siblings, and later to their children. She went back to visit every 2 years, sometimes more. She made Filipino food every Sunday with the specific care of someone who is maintaining a connection through practice. When she said she wanted to talk about where we were going to live, she was not making an impulsive suggestion. She was saying something she had been carrying for a long time and had decided was finally time to say directly. I did not understand this fully in that first conversation. I understand it now. The negotiation took 4 months. I want to be honest about what it was and what it wasn't. It was not a fight. I want to say that clearly because I think people assume that a disagreement of this scale in a marriage must be a fight, and it wasn't. It was a long, honest, sometimes difficult conversation that we had in many sessions over 4 months, sometimes at the kitchen table and sometimes on walks, and sometimes in the car driving to Danny's house or driving back. It was 2 people who loved each other and who had different things they needed from the last chapter of their lives, trying to understand each other's needs well enough to find something that honored both. My position when I started, I wanted to be near Danny and the grandchildren. Our grandchildren were 6, 4, and 2. The 6-year-old called me Papa Mike, and had a specific habit of falling asleep on my shoulder during movies that I considered one of the genuine privileges of my life. I had spent 26 years as a physical therapist, and I had been present for my patients, but not always fully present for my family. And retirement was supposed to be the correction of that imbalance. Retirement was supposed to be the grandkids on Sunday mornings, and the school plays, and the being there in the way I had not always been there when Danny was growing up. Maria's position, she wanted to go home. Not forever necessarily. She was not asking me to leave America permanently, or to commit to something irreversible. She was asking me to consider it, to genuinely consider what it would mean for her, after 32 years of building a life in a country that was not the country she came from, to spend the last chapter of her life near her own family, in her own language, in the place that had formed her before America did. She said it to me plainly one evening, which was not her usual approach, but which I had come to recognize as the sign that something needed to be said without softening. She said, "Michael, I have lived your life for 32 years. I have been in your country and spoken your language, and eaten your food, and made your holidays, and raised our son in your culture. I am asking you to try mine. Not forever, try it." I sat with that for a long time after she said it. She was right. That is not a complicated conclusion to arrive at. She had been living my life for 32 years. The ask was not unreasonable. The question was not whether to try. The question was how to try without losing the things that mattered most to me, which were Danny and the grandchildren, and the particular Sunday morning with the 6-year-old on my shoulder. We made a deal. Like all good deals in long marriages, it required both of us to give something we didn't want to give, and to trust that the other person understood the weight of what they were receiving. My terms, we would go for 1 year. Not permanently, 1 year. If at the end of 1 year I wanted to come back, we came back without argument and found something in California that worked for both of us. Danny and the kids would come to visit. Iloilo was not the moon, it was a long flight, and we would make it worth their while to come. We would do 2 trips back to California during the year, one of which would coincide with a major family event so that I did not miss everything. Maria's terms, I would give the year genuinely, not as an endurance test, not counting down, a genuine year, with the openness that a genuine year required. I would learn the neighborhood, I would meet her family, I would eat the food and go to the market, and make the effort to understand what she had been missing for 32 years, rather than experiencing the Philippines as a sacrifice I was making for her. We shook hands across the kitchen table. We had never shaken hands before in 32 years of marriage, and we both found this funny, and the laughing was a relief after the months of the conversation. We flew to Iloilo in March. I want to tell you about landing because landing in Iloilo when your wife is from there is a completely different experience from landing anywhere as a tourist. The airport is small, the way airports in smaller Philippine cities are small, regional, functional, without the engineered impressiveness of international airports. We were barely through the arrival doors when Maria made a sound I had not heard her make in 32 years of marriage, which was a specific, high, involuntary sound that meant she was seeing her sisters. Her 3 sisters were there, 2 of her sisters-in-law, her brother, 3 nieces and 2 nephews, adults now, some of them with their own children. A handmade sign that said, "Welcome home Maria and Michael," with a heart drawn next to each name. The hearts slightly uneven in a way that made them look more genuine than uniform hearts would have. I have been hugged in airports many times in my life. I have never been hugged the way Maria's family hugged her. It was not a greeting. It was an arrival, in the fullest sense of that word, the reunion of a person with the people who had been waiting for her for a very long time. I stood to the side of this for a few moments, watching. Then, Maria's sister Celia, who is 61 and who I had met twice in 32 years of visits that I had mostly not attended for work reasons I am no longer proud of, came directly to me and hugged me with the same fullness she had hugged Maria, and said, "Michael, finally, we have been waiting for you too. We have been waiting for you too." I did not expect to be included in the waiting. I was the American husband who had not come on most of the visits. I was the person who had, in a real sense, been the reason Maria was not here. And Celia hugged me and said they had been waiting for me too. And I understood in that moment that Maria's family had been doing what Maria had been doing for 32 years, which was holding a place for something they hoped would come eventually. We drove to the house that Maria's family had helped us find a rental in a neighborhood called Jaro that was close to where Maria had grown up and that had 3 bedrooms and a garden and was 1 block from a small neighborhood market. We paid 15,000 pesos a month. At the exchange rate when we arrived, $265. I had been paying $2,100 a month for the Fresno house. I did not say anything about the $265. I just let it be. The first month was the month I learned things. I learned that Maria's family operated on a frequency that had no American equivalent. The concept of dropping by, which in American suburban life means calling ahead and scheduling a visit, meant something completely different here. It meant appearing. At any time, for any reason, with food. The food appeared constantly, from every direction, from people I had met and people I had not yet met. Offered with a matter-of-fact generosity of people for whom feeding someone is not a gesture, but simply what you do when you are in the same place as someone. I learned that Maria's Filipino, which I had heard her speak on the phone with her sisters for 32 years, but had never experienced directed at the world around her, was a different language from the formal Tagalog I had looked up online. It was Hiligaynon, the language of the Western Visayas, and it moved at a speed and with a warmth that her English, fluent and precise as it was, did not fully contain. She was funnier in Hiligaynon, more relaxed. I watched her become, over the first month, a version of herself that 32 years of American life had not produced. And it was not that the American version was false, it was not, but that this version was additional, more complete. The version that existed before America made its modifications. I learned the Palenque, not fluently, slowly, with Maria beside me, learning what things were called and what they cost, and which vendors Celia used and why, and what the protocol was for the various interactions that a market morning required. I had been shopping at grocery stores my entire adult life. The Palenque was something else, an outdoor, covered, full-sensory, socially organized system for acquiring food that involved relationships rather than transactions. And that required me to be a different kind of shopper than I had ever been. I was bad at it for the first month. By the second month, I was acceptable. By the fourth month, I was going to the Palenque alone on Tuesdays, and the vendors I had become regulars with were treating me as a regular rather than a curiosity, which felt like a promotion I had earned. I learned to eat things I had not eaten before, which at 68 is more of an adjustment than it sounds. Maria had cooked Filipino food at home for 32 years, but the repertoire had been limited to what she had time and energy for, after long nursing shifts. Adobo, sinigang, a few standards. In Iloilo, the food was the full breadth of a cuisine that I had only ever seen a small part of. La Paz Bachoy, the noodle soup that originated in this city, for breakfast at a stall that had been making it since before Maria was born. Fresh seafood, in preparations I had not encountered. Fruit the mangoes and the lanzones and the rambutan and a thing called marang, that the first time Maria showed it to me, I genuinely did not believe was real, of a quality and variety that made the produce section of the Fresno Vons seem like a simulation. I called Danny every Sunday from the beginning, and I want to tell you about those calls, because they were the thread that made everything else possible. Danny is 36, and he is a good man and a good father, and he handled this situation with more grace than I had the right to expect. He had grown up with a Filipino mother, and he understood something about what the Philippines meant to her that I, having grown up without that context, had to learn. His wife Sarah had taken the kids to Disneyland the month before we left and had sent us approximately 300 photographs. And on the Sunday calls I saw all three grandkids in increasing detail, and they saw me against the backdrop of a ceiling fan and an Iloilo afternoon. And my 6-year-old granddaughter Emma asked me once why the light was yellow behind me, and I said, "Because it's always warm here, sweetheart." She said, "Always?" I said, "Pretty much always." She said, "I want to come." Danny said, "We know, Em." They came in August, Danny and Sarah and all three kids, 9 days. I had spent 4 months building a life in Iloilo, and I watched my son and grandchildren experience it for the first time. And the experience I had had in the first month, the adjustment, the new system, the learning of everything from the beginning, compressed for them into 9 days of discovery that was uncomplicated by the anxiety of whether it was permanent. Emma ate bachoy for breakfast on the second morning and declared it better than cereal, which is not a high bar, but which she said with complete sincerity. My 4-year-old grandson Jake spent most of his time in the garden of Maria's sister Celia's house, which had become a second base of operations for our family life, chasing the chickens that Celia kept and being chased by them in return, with the specific mutual suspicion of two parties who do not fully understand each other's intentions. My 2-year-old granddaughter Lily, who was at the age where everything is equally interesting and equally unremarkable, spent most of the time being passed between Maria's family members, who had been told about her for 2 years, and who greeted her with the comprehensive warmth of people who have been waiting to love someone specific and are now finally able to. On the last evening, Danny and I sat on the balcony after the kids were in bed and the women were inside. He said, "Dad, you look different." I said, "Different how?" He said, "More relaxed, like you're not in a hurry to be somewhere else." I thought about that. I said, "I think I'm not." He said, "Mom looks like herself here. Like the version of her that she always was, but that I didn't see as much when she was working." I said, "Yeah, I'm seeing that too." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We might come back at Christmas." I said, "I'll put in the request with the family." He laughed. He said, "The family has opinions." I said, "They have opinions about everything." He said, "They're your family now too, you know." I said, "I know that. I'm starting to understand what it means. Let me give you the numbers, because the numbers changed our life, and you deserve to know how." Combined income. My pension from 26 years in the physical therapy department at the hospital, plus Social Security, plus Maria's Social Security from her 28 years of nursing, together approximately $4,200 a month. In Fresno, this was comfortable, but not free. The house cost $2,100. The 2 cars cost $800 in insurance and maintenance, utilities, property tax. The ordinary costs of a California life that added up to approximately $3,600 a month, leaving us $600 of margin. In Iloilo, rent $265. Utilities, electricity with reasonable air conditioning use, water, internet for the grandkid calls, $120. 2 motorbikes. Instead of cars, we got motorbikes, which Maria rode with the confidence of someone who grew up with them, and which I rode with the caution of someone who grew up with cars. $30 a month in fuel and maintenance. Food from the Palenque and local restaurants, $280. Maria's mother's grave maintenance. The family contributions that are part of Filipino family life, and that I had come to understand as not an obligation, but a participation, $150. Medical doctor Villanueva, who has been managing both our health for a year with the attentiveness of a physician who has time, $30 a month combined. Medical evacuation insurance for both of us, $38 a month. Medications, $45. Total, $958 a month on $4,200 a month. Surplus, $3,242 every month. In 1 year, we have saved $38,904. We have not touched the retirement savings we came with. They are growing. After 30 years of working and saving and watching the California cost of living absorb almost everything we generated, we are at 68 and 64, accumulating wealth for the first time. I am telling you this not to make the Philippines sound like a financial miracle, though the numbers are real. I am telling you because the financial freedom changed something in both of us that I did not fully anticipate. The removal of the low-level financial anxiety that had been part of our life in California. The calculation, the margin that was always tighter than it should have been produced. A quality of daily life that I can only describe as lighter. The days are lighter here, not because they are easier, but because they are not carrying that weight. We are staying. That is the conclusion of the negotiation that started at the kitchen table in Fresno on a Sunday afternoon in October. Not staying forever in the sense that we will never return to California. Staying in the sense that Iloilo is now home and California is now where we visit, which is the reverse of what it was, and which I have made my peace with, and which continues to require my active peacemaking on the Sunday evenings, when Emma calls and shows me a drawing she made, and I watch it on a screen instead of on my knee. The grandkids are coming at Christmas. Danny and Sarah are talking about longer visits. Emma told me on the last call that she is learning the word for fish in Hiligaynon from Maria, which Maria had apparently taught her on their last video call without telling me, and which Emma deployed in the call with the pride of a child who has a secret. The word is Isda. She said it 3 times to confirm I had heard it. I told her pronunciation was perfect. Maria, from the other room, said it was almost perfect. Emma asked what almost meant. Maria said it meant she needed to practice. Emma said she would practice. She will practice. The Filipina grandmother will make sure of it. Maria is, in Iloilo, the most herself I have seen her in 32 years. This is the thing I want to say most clearly. To any man watching this, who has a wife from somewhere else, and who has been building a life with her in your country for decades. She was herself in America. She was a real and full and complete version of herself in California. But here she is, the version of herself that existed before America, that was formed by this place and by the language and the family and the food and the specific quality of a Philippine evening on a balcony with sisters who know every version of her, and that version was always there under the American version. And I had not seen it fully until I came here. I came here for her. I found something I did not expect, which was that the life she had been carrying for 32 years was a life worth following into. The deal was 1 year. We are not leaving after 1 year. I told Maria this on our balcony one evening, 6 months in, watching the sunset do the thing it does here, the orange and the pink, and the specific quality of light that ends days in the Philippines, which is different from any light I knew in California. She said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I'm sure." She said, "The grandkids." I said, "The grandkids will come, and when they grow up and ask Emma where she learned the word for fish, she'll say, 'From my Lola in the Philippines.'" Maria smiled. She said, "Isda." I said, "Isda, I will practice." She said, "I need to practice." She is, as she has been for 32 years, almost certainly right.